Może to właśnie te wersy, które piszę.
Perhaps these lines I am writing will be the only testimony to my former life, but I will be happy if my writings reach you, free citizens of the world. Perhaps the spark of my inner fire will ignite you, and you will fulfill at least part of your will in your life. You will take revenge. You will take revenge on the murderers. Dear finder of these writings, I have a request for you. This is actually the main purpose of my writing. Let my life, doomed to destruction, gain meaning. May my hellish days, my hopeless tomorrow, gain meaning in the future. I am giving you information only about a part, a minimum of what happens in the hell of Birkenau, Auschwitz. Imagine what reality looked like. I am in the hell of death, and I cannot even properly assess the great loss I have suffered. I myself am also doomed to death. Can the dead cry for the dead? But you, a free citizen of the world, a stranger to me, I ask you to shed a tear for them when you see their photograph before your eyes. I dedicate my writings to them all. This is my tear. Weep for my family and my people. I will list here the names of my burned family. My mother, Sore. My sister, Liebe. My sister, Esther Rochel. My wife, Sonia. My father-in-law, Refel. My brother-in-law, Wolf. They died on the 8th of December 1942, gassed and burned. These words, Arbeit macht frei, work makes you free, that you can see right behind me, were the first lie that awaited for the people brought here. Exactly 81 years ago, the gates of Auschwitz-Birkenau were opened, and those who, by miracle, survived the hell of Auschwitz could reclaim their freedom. It is estimated that during the 5 years of the camp's operation, about 1.1 million people were murdered here, mostly of Jewish origin. There were also Poles and Roma people when the camp was liberated. About 80,000 people were left. Today, we commemorate the 81st anniversary of the liberation of the Nazi German concentration and extermination camp Auschwitz-Birkenau. This is a special broadcast from the memorial site. The main part of today's commemorations will start at 4 p.m. Then survivors will have a chance to speak. I encourage you to follow our special broadcast at our international studio. Witold Tambaka and Paweł Zieliński will be talking to people from Poland and abroad. People who dedicate a lot of work and their own time to shape the memory about the Auschwitz concentration camp so that it will never disappear. It is very important to give the voice to those who are still with us. You will have a chance to hear the memories of those who have already passed away. In their words and in their memories, we can find extremely important messages for us, especially nowadays. There are clever pieces of advice, references that are so much needed. And now, a video about Sonderkommando, a group of people that were forced to work in the heart of this death factory. Sonderkommando, or a special task force, was assigned to work in the crematoria. In the early stages of the camp's existence, when there was only one crematorium in operation, several dozen prisoners were needed to run it, but this was not yet the Sonderkommando. When a gas chamber was set up in the crematorium morgue, it quickly became apparent that the crematorium was unable to burn so many bodies. A decision was then made to bury the bodies in mass graves near the camp being built in Birkenau, and then to set up a makeshift gas chamber there. Mass extermination in the gas chamber of crematorium number 1 proved difficult for many reasons. A decision was made to create a makeshift gas chamber at the back of the Birkenau camp. This is when the so-called bunker number 1 was built. It used to be called the Red House. Initially, when Jews were brought in, they were murdered in the gas chamber. Then a group of about 20 people was selected from each transport, whose task was to bury the bodies of those murdered. And each time a group would be assigned to this task. And that brought back to the main camp. They would be murdered with phenol injections at the camp hospital, and their bodies would be burned in crematorium number 1. At some point, the SS concluded that a permanent Sonderkommando task force should be employed to operate the extermination infrastructure. The expansion of the Auschwitz-Birkenau camp complex required a significant increase in the Sonderkommando prisoners. 4 new crematoria were built in Birkenau, significantly larger and more efficient than those in Auschwitz. The prisoners were well aware that, as members of the Sonderkommando, they would be regarded by the Germans as eyewitnesses to mass crimes. Those who did not survive still found time to describe their experiences. The Auschwitz-Birkenau State Museum in Oświęcim holds the notes made in the camp by prisoners who were forced to work in the Sonderkommando. It was certainly an absolutely traumatic situation for them when they had to watch their compatriots, often people they knew personally, being killed. Their relatives and loved ones were first deceived because they were told they were only going to the baths, and then they died, and then their bodies were transported to the gas chambers and burned there. Against their will, the members of the Sonderkommando became witnesses to the unprecedented crime of genocide that took place in the gas chambers of the Auschwitz-Birkenau camp. Between the spring of 1942, when the Sonderkommando was formed as a special group, and the end of the camp's existence in January 1945, it is estimated that a total of between 1,800 and 2,000 people were employed, or rather forced, to work in the Auschwitz Sonderkommando. Of these, we know that approximately 50 to 60 people survived the war. It was the members of the Sonderkommando who were the first witnesses at the trials of Nazi war criminals.
Witam Państwa serdecznie. Znajdujemy się
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. We are at the central bathhouse at the grounds of Auschwitz-Birkenau. We will be talking about Sonderkommando with Dr. Igor Bartosik from the Research Center at the Auschwitz Museum. Let's start with the selection and how did it happen. Perhaps we should begin with 1941, when Auschwitz was still for the Poles. These were mostly political prisoners. One of them was called Wacław Lipka. He worked with machines, and because of his skills, he was picked up to handle crematorium. crematoria. In 1940, handling crematoria in Auschwitz was completely different from what it later became in Auschwitz-Birkenau, or handling the crematorium number 1 in 1941 when mass extermination began. The situation of that task force that primarily included Poles at the beginning began to change in 1942. First Jews joined them, and from that time the crematorium number 1 was handled by the Sonderkommando. April 1942, Auschwitz-Birkenau, and this is when the Sonderkommando started operating. After they were executed, new Sonderkommandos were created. These people were required to do very hard manual labor. It was physically demanding. Was that the main criterion, or perhaps nationality was more important? When extermination started at Auschwitz-Birkenau, first in makeshift chambers and then in professional mass extermination devices, nationality was important, but it wasn't everything. You have to remember that in 1943, a German prisoner also was assigned to Sonderkommando. He was an expert at the incineration facilities. He was in charge of managing those. In addition, Soviet POWs were assigned to Sonderkommando as well. They were evacuated from the Majdanek camp in April 1944 and included in the crematorium staff. So there was a small group of Poles, there was a small group of Jews, a German prisoner, and also Jewish prisoners. So strong and healthy Jews mostly. Well, people who joined the Sonderkommando came from newly arrived transports. Someone who stayed in the camp for a long time wouldn't be able to handle such demanding work. There were also prisoners who were assigned there as a penalty, which was equaled death sentence. What did Sonderkommando do? They mainly handled gas chambers and crematoria. When a transport arrived in the camp, Sonderkommando were tasked with calming down the victims. They were reluctant to do that job. They answered people's questions, such as, "What will happen to us?" Often there was a language barrier. Then, clothes left by the victims had to be carried out to cars or trucks that took them to be sorted. Then they had to incinerate the bodies, clean up the chambers, and then break through the burned bones of the victims, and then take the remnants to the Vistula River that's about 1.5 kilometers away from here. There are some testimonies that the Germans didn't want to get outside of the camp. Were those people then treated differently because of them? Some say they were murdered every 3 months. Is that true? There was a rotation of staff. You could even get transfers to other sort of work at the camp. However, when mass extermination started at gas chambers, those people could not get transferred anywhere. They were isolated. They could not change their line of work. I would like to dispel one myth, though. From my historical research, it would seem that there was only one case where members of Sonderkommando were murdered. They were planning a mutiny in 1942. Later on, there were only partial executions. However, the members of Sonderkommando were aware that they were going to die. However, they didn't know when it would happen. So when they knew if they knew that they would die, why did they do that? Henrik Mandelbaum, a former prisoner, a member of Sonderkommando, said that when he had got to the camp, he was 22 years old. He was a very well-built man, and he started working in Sonderkommando in crematorium number 5. The incineration facilities were didn't work back then, and the people were burnt on piles of wood. And that gentleman said that he saw hell on earth. He saw dozens of dead bodies. He knew his job would involve burning dead bodies, but he saw himself in those people, and he remembered the words of her mom, who said, "Be a good man, otherwise you'll go to hell." And then he thought, "I am in hell." When he threw the first body into the fire, he said he still remembers. It was a man in his 50s when he threw the body in the fire. He just wanted to survive, even if it would be only to tell his account of what he saw with his own eyes, to make people realize that they should respect every human life. You too had a priceless relationship. I hope so. We were very close. Our mutual closeness allowed me, partially, because he would never let anyone completely to get close with him. We managed to forge a relationship. Yes, it started with me being a member of the museum staff. I asked him about details of assessment uniforms. I arranged to meet him, and that's how our long friendship started. What could we say about the resistance movement? The people who were right at the heart of that hell wanted to save not just themselves, but also other people. Please note that Sonderkommando prisoners would organize food for starving colleagues. They would organize duels for the resistance movement. And when the mutiny was planned in 1944, they were supposed to be part of the attacking force against the SS men. Those plans were very broad. Jewish girls from the munition works managed to get some gunpowder, and they were planning on making some makeshift explosive devices, switch off the crematoria and use the explosive devices against the SS men who were going to be gradually eliminated. There was supposed to be an insurrection at the camp, because the prisoners were afraid that when the Soviet front would come closer, the SS men would try to eliminate all the members. So they tried to save themselves. What about the manuscripts? Have they been preserved? The Sonderkommando prisoners were very well aware of the situation they were in. They were conspicuously taking photos of burning victims. Those people, in a way, wanted to preserve what they went through. At the very heart of hell, they were writing with respect, with emotions about people who were dying. Hess was very disrespectful of Sonderkommando, and they just wanted to stay alive. Some of them buried the manuscripts in the ground, and they said that everything they do was related to life. Dr. Igor Bartosik, thank you very much for the conversation. We were talking about Henryk Mandelbaum. He was an eyewitness of the extermination. Thanks to his testimony, we found out what gas chambers were. Let's listen to what he had to say. I arrived in Brzezinka in April 1943 from block number 7. We were taken from quarantine to block number 11. Once there, I found out that I had been assigned to work with the Sonderkommando. I could not refuse, because not only I, but also my colleagues realized what would happen to us if we did. The Sonderkommando consisted mainly of Greek, Polish and Dutch Jews. There were also Poles among those workers. From there, they undressed and went to the gas chamber. After the chamber was filled, an SS man would take the cyclone from the ambulance and throw it inside through 2 holes. After about 15 minutes, they were already dead, that is, gassed. That was our Sonderkommando room. We were the crematorium staff. There were 40 to 45 of us on each shift, depending on the day. After the dead were gassed, their hair was cut and their gold teeth were pulled out. From this gas chamber, after gassing, the corpses were carried to the exit. Here, this way, to the pits. There was a pit about 10 to 15 meters long and about 6 to 7 meters wide. And the corpses would be thrown into the furnace. Human excrement and fat were taken to the furnace and poured over them so that the corpses would burn faster, and they burned continuously.
"81 years after the liberation of Auschwitz, we met in this place, and once again its walls cry out, never again, but the world seems to be deaf." We will discuss this topic, memory in the context of modern wars and modern conflicts, with our guests. Dr. David Silberklang, historian from Yad Vashem Institute. Good afternoon.
Hello.
And Mr. Konstanty Gebert, journalist and writer from Kultura Liberalna. Good afternoon.
Afternoon.
Gentlemen, the great Marian Turski left us with the 11th commandment: don't be indifferent. Looking at the world's reaction to the wars and humanitarian crisis right now, have we, as humanity, truly learned the lesson from Auschwitz or not?
I think we have a long way to go in learning the lessons and in showing more concern and less indifference. There seems to be sometimes in the world selective concern. if something is close to a particular society or a particular government. But let's face it, there are millions of people who in the last decade and a half have been murdered in Africa, especially, and in other places. And you don't find that in the news very much because it's far away, it's Africa. I can't explain it morally, but I think we have a long way to go till we'll live up to Marian Turski's 11th commandment.
And your thoughts brings me another question as the tragedy of the Holocaust as a universal warning. In Europe, of course, we know it, but how about the other parts of the world?
The Holocaust, the way we teach in Yad Vashem and lots of other places is the Holocaust has particular and universal aspects to it. So Germans, of course, have things to look at and study about themselves. And Israel, the Jewish people, of course, every society that had some involvement has to look back at itself and learn. But there's the universal, because part of the reason that a major reason that we study the Holocaust is what you were talking about before, so that we can know enough collectively, so that we can try to prevent such things from happening again, so that our societies understand enough to maybe build better societies. And that means that places that had no connection to the Holocaust, in Africa, far off in Asia, wherever it might be, we don't want these things to happen again. The Nazis set a precedent. Precedent means it could happen again. Not exactly the same, but that's where we have a lot of work to do.
And we are about 81 years after the liberation, and we've got a long way to go. Do you see, Mr. Konstanty, the finish line for the lesson? Is it even possible?
The American journalist David Reef wrote in his book on the war in Bosnia that after Sarajevo, after Srebrenica, we now know what never again means. It means that never again shall Germans kill Jews in World War II. That's all it means. The lesson of never again clearly has not been learned. It happened again, it is happening again, it will happen again. And the only way to make life more difficult for the perpetrators of genocide is not only not to be indifferent. That's the first step. If you're not indifferent, you have a chance of saving yourself. But in order to save somebody else, you need to do one more thing. You need to make a difference. Mm-hmm. Go out in the world and act. And most of us probably have the feeling that the world is spinning way beyond anybody's control. We cannot impact it. But if we accept this, this only means that we're leaving it to those who think they can, and they will. The perpetrators of genocide act. We need to act to stop them.
And that brings me to another question, because in the 40s, the world could say we've got a lack of information, we cannot act because we don't know about it. And these days, during the wars, we've got cell phones, we've got social media, we've got all the stuff, and we know what is happening, and we did not act. Is this a proof that the knowledge of a crime does not necessarily determine the reaction?
The difference between what we know now and what the contemporaries of the Shoah knew is possibly one of quantity, but not of quality. We have reports from German soldiers who had returned from the Eastern Front back home. They desperately wanted to talk about what they had witnessed, or worse, perpetrated. Nobody wanted to listen. I spoke to Serb paramilitary and civilians in Bosnia. Most everybody knew as much as they wanted to know. The issue is not our knowledge. The issue is taking responsibility for what we know. And this ultimately is a question for the individual conscience. And it's, I think, trying to take the easy way out, to say, well, we didn't know, or we didn't know enough, or it hasn't been explained clearly enough. When we see people dehumanized, we know exactly where that can lead. Mercifully, not in every case, but this is the moment to act. And we don't. Look at the way that the hatred of migrants has become normalized. In Poland, in schoolyards, the word refugee is an insult. If this is the kind of world we want to live in, then we are co-responsible for the consequences.
And from last years, we see something like inflation of words. Terms like genocide, Nazism are frequently used as a maybe political insult. In such casual use of Holocaust terminology is a profanation on a comparative mechanism, which is unfortunately nowadays something what we cannot do anything about it.
We can do a lot to teach about events, the precision of understanding an event, and about language. If everything is a crime against humanity, everything is genocide, and everything is the Holocaust, then the Holocaust, the Shoah, is nothing. Genocide is meaningless, the term, because everything is that. So it's just, and not everything is genocide. And this is a problem that's been going on for a long time. People talk about everything is a Holocaust, the Holocaust of animals who are being slaughtered for food. We might be against, someone might be against slaughtering animals for food. It's not the Shoah. Or the Holocaust of the unborn. You might be opposed to abortion, but it's not the Shoah. We have to learn to be precise. And I think among the people who need to lead the way in teaching our societies are, of course, people who are expert in the various subjects, but also the political leaders, the journalists, the people who know how to write and know the meaning of words. All those people who know the meanings of words and the importance of understanding what the term means and what it does not mean are the people who should be careful and be teaching the rest of us. And then maybe we can learn, maybe, what actually is particular crime. And maybe then, as Costa is saying, we can then also, we want to take responsibility, at least we understand what we're taking responsibility about, and then we can step forward and try to do something about it.
It will be much harder in these days because we are definitely entering an era of post-memory. The eyewitnesses that are no longer with us. So we can use only books and the memories. It will be harder to teach about these days and specifically this language.
The eyewitnesses contributed a tremendous amount to our understanding. And yes, there are fewer and fewer, and very soon, unfortunately, they won't be with us anymore because that's what happens. People pass away. But the first 25 years or so after the end of World War II, the end of the Shoah, the eyewitnesses actually played a very small role in the initial research and remembrance around the world. They were there, but they began to play much more of a role, especially in the 1970s and 80s. We need to adapt our educational tools and all that to a period when there won't be survivors, but our understanding and our research and our learning to prevent is not based only on survivors.
Dr. David Silberklang, thank you for being with us.
Thank you.
And Mr. Konstanty Gebert, thank you so much for being with us. A nawiązując do tego, co przed chwilą między innymi
Now, referencing what has been said, an answer to a very difficult question of how to talk to young people about Holocaust. Can we do it without too much pathos and without cruelty? This was the task that the Auschwitz Museum had to face. One of the first exhibitions at the museum was created in 1955. It was mainly designed by former Auschwitz prisoners. It was created at a time when practically all visitors had either survived the war themselves or knew a great deal about it. Certain things did not need to be explained because they were conveyed in a very direct way. That's the difference. In addition, however, the means of communication have changed. We communicate differently. This year, for the first time, visitors to the memorial sites can now visit the first part of the new main exhibition. This is a great event for us here at the museum, at the memorial site. It is a huge, even historic change. We should mention that the main exhibition is a fundamental element explaining and describing the history of this place. People who come here come primarily for the authenticity of the site. They come here to see the place where it happened. But the exhibition enables guides, because most visits are guided, it lets them describe the history of this place. I believe that this exhibition would not work without a guide, so that was another key assumption. That is, the guide should be the one to talk about the experience of prisoners in Auschwitz, or more broadly, the Auschwitz-Birkenau. We wanted to draw attention to the prisoner, to the person who experienced Auschwitz, and it is the prisoners, both those who survived and those who died in Auschwitz, who are really the central figures of this exhibition. This part of the new main exhibition shows a human being. What happens to a person from the moment they arrive at the camp, when they have a specific name, a surname, when they remember their parents' names, when they still have a photograph of their wife hidden somewhere, or maybe they carry a religious item with them, or perhaps they took a talisman to help them in life, because we all have dreams, plans, and so on. And suddenly it turns out that in the camp, this person is first given a number, they get a striped uniform, and they lose their identity. From full humanity to people becoming numbers and machines. That was the idea of those who set up the camp. That was the idea of those who developed the entire concentration camp system in Nazi Germany. So that's what we want to show. A few weeks ago, the first part of the new exhibition was opened at the Auschwitz Museum. The title is Auschwitz Experiences of the Auschwitz Prisoners, and this is what we want to talk about with Mr. Piotr Setkiewicz, who is the head of the research center at the Auschwitz Museum. Tell us, where did this idea come from to change the main exhibition? Well, this is the third exhibition in the history of the museum, but the second one that was created in 1955 was there for nearly 70 years in an unchanged form. So it seemed that it was physically worn down, and here we also have a different type of visitors than were there in the years immediately following the end of the Second World War. These are the people that do not remember the war. Their parents sometimes don't remember the war. And there are a lot of people coming from other countries who don't know much about the history of the World War II. how does this exhibition differ from the previous one? Well, first and foremost, it draws on the best patterns of the first exhibition. You will be able to see some exhibits from that time. These are the items from the so-called Canada warehouses. These are the things that were taken from those that were killed: suitcases, everyday belongings, and hair that was cut from their heads. This exhibition will also include some new items that will bring closer to our visitors of who was responsible for Auschwitz, who took the most important decisions. There will be also an important part about the SS men who played crucial role in the functioning of Auschwitz. There will be also something about the expansion of the camp, so that our visitors know how big an operation it was. It wasn't only Auschwitz and Auschwitz-Birkenau, but there were also some sub-camps in Lower Silesia there. So this is the idea behind the first exhibition. The second part will concern the most important fundamental things about Holocaust of Jews and other prisoners, how they were gassed in gas chambers and burned in the crematoria. The third part is an open part and includes some new content, and it is an attempt to show some feelings and experiences of prisoners, that what they went through after coming to Auschwitz. So this is this different approach in this part of the exhibition. You are showing the everyday of individual prisoners. Yes, and we realize that this is extremely difficult. How can we show the suffering of a prisoner caused, for example, by the cold? The prisoners would spend even several hours at the roll calls at temperatures in winter that were below zero. We have a quote from a prisoner's report. We have a drawing of one of the prisoners, and we also have a cement sack. The prisoners who had only very thin striped uniforms were trying to heat their bodies. They were stealing cement sacks and they used them, and it was deemed a sabotage action, and there were penalties for that. There are new historical and narrative exhibitions now, and I think this exhibition does not go this direction. Yes, we tried to accentuate the fact that this exhibition is at an authentic site where all those events happened. So this is not an anonymous exhibition at the center of an American town, so to say, but it's the venue where the horror of Holocaust happened. The majority of windows at this exhibition was not removed, so our visitors can peer through the window and see that they are at this particular site, that there are other camp buildings all around. So we don't want our visitors to see too much technology, big screens. There's only one screen there. So this is a more traditional exhibition that has a modern touch to it, which of course will our visitors see and assess after visiting us. Dr. Piotr Setkiewicz, historian and head of the research center at the Auschwitz Museum. Thank you very much for this conversation. Mr. Zank was a regular prisoner of Auschwitz, but after contacting Sonderkommando members, he got to know what it was, and now a report from him.
Poza relacjami samych członków
Apart from the accounts of the Sonderkommando members themselves, which are an excellent source for researching the extermination that took place in Auschwitz, we also have accounts from prisoners who witnessed their work and their stay in the camp. These are materials that may not tell us what happened in the gas chambers, but they do tell us about the very particular situation of this group of prisoners. They were in a very dramatic situation, which seemingly had certain privileges, but in fact was perhaps the most difficult situation a prisoner could find themselves in. Because I was one of the youngest, at that time, I was strong and healthy, so I was assigned to transport corpses to the crematorium. And I had to do this either every day or every other day. In the crematorium, I saw piles of corpses and prisoners with buckets were circling around them, pulling out the prisoners' gold teeth, and they were all supervised by SS men. I spoke to one prisoner who had been in the Sonderkommando for a long time and had somehow managed to escape. He told me that the Sonderkommando consisted mainly, if not entirely, of healthy, strong, and above all, people who were Jewish, who were not mentally or physically ill. He managed to take advantage of an opportunity and escaped from there. These prisoners were not allowed to contact other prisoners. They were not allowed to talk or greet anybody. Over time, because the work was very hard, these prisoners wore themselves out. They would also gas those prisoners and send them to be burned. And of course, they would select others from the incoming transports to replace them.
What happened at Auschwitz could be examined in many contexts, including the ethical and moral one. This will be the topic of our discussion with Bishop Roman Pindel of the Diocese of Bielsko-Żywiec and Ms. Marta Titaniec, Secretary of the Polish Council of Christians and Jews. After 1945, the question, where was God, was asked many times. And I would like to ask you, where were humans? Where were the people back then? Isn't asking about God is not trying to blame the heavens for what people did. God did not devise Auschwitz. God created the men who did that, who eliminated more than 1 million human beings over here. Men devised that suffering. But we as Christians believe that God was present in all those who were suffering. The Bible tells us that God is a loving Father. Whoever loves suffers along with us, along with our people, with His children. We believe that God sided with those suffering. The question is about the human responsibility, the responsibility of the people. For me today, Auschwitz is a challenge, a question: what happens when the cult of a nation, of a race, of ideology, of an idea steps in and replaces God? Auschwitz calls us to be vigilant. Nowadays, a world is not a calm place. So what is Auschwitz calling us to do? What can we do as Christians? What can we do in those turbulent times where we lack safety? How can we go about our days? Are we being vigilant, or do we allow anti-Semitic or anti-Ukrainian attitudes to dominate us? Are we allowing hate, xenophobia to replace God? So, in the Bible, Cain kills Abel. So many years have passed since then. Was that not enough for people to stop killing other people? Could we not have achieved a higher stage of moral development? Cain and Abel belong to the part of the Bible that is not a historical one. It did not actually happen. It's a story that tells us about what humans are like. Fratricide is inscribed in human nature, and so is rejection of one's fault. God asks, "Where's your brother Abel?" And the killer says, "Am I the custodian of my brother?" rejecting the responsibility. Those who were put in trial after the war for their crimes, they said they were only carrying out orders, renouncing responsibility. So I think that fratricide and Cain's response was a timeless action of a man who did something wrong. He did something that was really wrong. He killed his brother. At something that has been with me since the beatification in Peru in 2015. Back then, a bishop who visited many victims came to the prison where the leaders of that movement were held, and he was going cell to cell and gave a copy of the Bible to everyone there and telling them to read that, to read about killing someone's brother. And when the bishop came out of the prison, he was asked to visit a cell where Professor Kuzma, the main ideologue of that Maoist guerrilla, was held. And the leader, under the influence of the text, said, "I'm guilty, I did it, I regret it." And the bishop, who thought those two Polish martyrs died for the faith, asked him about a motive. And the man replied, "They were an obstacle for us in carrying out the revolution, so they had to die." And the last words of that Professor Kuzman show us that he transgressed his atavism and he did not renounce his guilt.
Niektórzy z tych, którzy dopuszczali się do tej strasznych rzeczy, mówili o tym, że tylko wykonywali rozkazy.
His Eminency said that some of those people said that they had only been carrying orders.
To jest kwestia
What people witnessed in Auschwitz, is it just a moral collapse of a man, or was it something bigger, something demonic?
Wyzwaniem dla nas dzisiaj jest to, że właśnie Auschwitz nie zostało zdobione przez
The challenge for us today
kogoś,
is that
jakiegoś demona,
Auschwitz is not the work of some demon or a space being.
Normalni ludzie
It was created by people, normal people, who call themselves Christians, and this remains a challenge for us. People did it. People did it to other people. And going back to what Reverend said, we have to be vigilant. Watch what's in us. What makes us do something good or something bad. Vigilance, responsibility is important because we will be judged for our own actions, not for somebody else's action. What did I do to make the world a better place? Am I a force of good or a force of evil? This is today's challenge. Auschwitz was devised and carried out by normal people. What happened that they did that? And now the last brief question: is the sin of indifference just as big as the sin that is committed intentionally? It's hard to measure the sin and its size. We can predict what it will lead to. We can predict the development of an ideology. Rudolf Hess, commander-in-chief of that camp, was a fairly decent citizen of his country. He had plans for the future. He wanted to buy a farm, to have children, to lead a quiet life. However, people who ran the school he attended saw him as an obedient tool who will perfectly perpetrate what they had in store. He stepped out of the church, officially resigned from the church because he thought that the church disappointed him. Bishop Roman Pindel and Ms. Marta Titaniec, thank you very much for the conversation. And now moving on to the commemorations of the 81st anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz. Klaudia Aramowicz is in a very significant place. Klaudia, over to you.
Dzień dobry, zbliżamy się do godziny 16. W związku z tym za parę
We
minut
are
rozpocznie się ta najważniejsza część
almost at the beginning of the commemorations. It's almost 4 p.m. It will be held in the building called the sauna at the site of the former Auschwitz-Birkenau camp. It is the 81st anniversary of the liberation.
Every year we get less and less chance to talk with the people who experienced the hell that happened at Auschwitz. This is why a decision was made to give the floor, to give the voice to all those people, to hear out these statements that is here at a time of various international conflicts. This is why the International Auschwitz Council made a decision that no political interventions will be there during the commemoration. You are not going to hear any politicians during this commemoration. We will give the voice to the people who experienced Auschwitz firsthand, who were prisoners here. you will also be able to listen to Auschwitz survivors who are going to talk about their memories, give their account, but they will also talk about the modern concept of memory. After the main address by Bernard Offen, there will be a common prayer, and also the lights will be lighted. Now over to Birkenau.
Szanowni Państwo,
Ladies and gentlemen, to today's commemoration, I would like to welcome the former prisoners of Auschwitz and survivors of the Holocaust. I'd like to welcome all the representatives of national and regional authorities as well as foreign delegations. I welcome ambassadors of the countries that the history of this place is important for them. I welcome the representatives of churches and religious communities, as well as the Jewish community and the Roma community. I welcome the representatives of all organizations and institutions and other people who came to this commemoration, as well as all those who join us via online streaming and on TV.
It's been almost 100 years since I experienced and the Jewish population experienced these horrors. And it's fading in the memory of people. It's superseded by other events in the world. But Auschwitz is a unique experience in the Western world. And so I think it has to be remembered.
Ich sage auch immer in der Schule,
I always repeat to the students at schools that they should learn from what has happened, that it can always repeat. Be vigilant, don't be silent. When you experience injustice, counteract. Don't be silent, because we should never forget. Because the future of this world is in the hands of young people. That is why at every meeting that I often have with young people, I repeat that the future of the world is in your hands, and it depends on you what it will be like, so that you do not allow what happened in Auschwitz-Birkenau to happen again. It means that I'm alive, and it is great, and I wish people valued life, because indeed, if they don't come to their senses, nothing good awaits anyone. It is not that some are smarter, so they will win, and those less smart won't. No, there will be no winners now. If it comes to something new, there will be only the defeated. What has happened has to somehow resurface, and we have to tell everyone that if we continue to live like we do, with wars, undemocratic parties, then difficult time will come. It doesn't matter if there is a skin color or religion, it doesn't matter. This is a human being, and you should treat them the way you would like to be treated. Until we achieve that, I'm afraid there will be conflicts and problems. It is a bit difficult for me because I am experiencing it all over again, dwelling on it, and I am angry that life has turned out this way. But the war happened, and this was all caused by the war. It is important to warn young people that they should respect each other, and that they show consideration for each other. We must, as thinking beings who want good for humanity, one day break this spiral of evil. Mutual accusations, you did this to me and I paid you back, that was my revenge, and this spiral goes up. One day, we as thinking people must use our common sense and stop this. We should think and remember about the tragic past, but not get stuck in hatred towards other people who think or speak differently. Look at the world in a positive way. It is very difficult, but we should do that. There is no other way. All I want is to draw your attention to the lyrics, because these lyrics are exceptionally inspiring. The author of the lyrics is Rabbi Nachman of Breslov, better known as Rabbi Nachman of Uman, because that was where he had his body buried among the graves of the victims of the pogrom. Our entire world, our world, is like a very narrow bridge. And the main thing is, do not be afraid at all. Ladies and gentlemen, we have now listened to the voices of Auschwitz survivors. During this commemoration, we will hear an exceptional testimony of Zełman Gradowski that has been deported to Auschwitz with his family from Grodno. His relatives, his wife and parents have been murdered in gas chambers immediately after coming to the camp. Zełman has become a part of Sonderkommando, which was a special task force of prisoners that worked in gas chambers and crematoria. In order to inform the world about Holocaust, he noted down notes that became a literal testimony of the Holocaust. And now Mr. Michał Żebrowski will read his testimony. I loved her, and with trembling I awaited her coming. Like a faithful servant, I would stand hours long and admire her splendor and her magic. She was man's closest friend. In her, he confided the secrets of his life, and to her he revealed all. In her kingdom he felt safe and secure, happy and overjoyed, infused with hope and courage. That was all before, when I would see her in my still free sky, when I was still a man like other men. A child of my parents, I lived with brothers and sisters, a wife who loved me, and the moon was then for me a source of life and joy, for she intoxicated me with her generous hand and enchanted me by her magic and beauty. But now that I am alone, left solitary here, my home, my family, my world, my people, wiped out by the pirates cruelly and for no reason, and I, alone among millions, under sentence of death, sit enchained in my prison. Today, when I see her, I run from her as from a ghost. Why do you come today as deep in love and dreams, as enchanted as before, and you do not even feel the great disaster, the great misfortune that they, the murderers and pirates, have brought with them to the world? Why do you feel nothing? Don't you miss them, the millions of vibrant lives that once, in all of Europe, lived calm and carefree until the storm arrived and drowned the world in a sea of blood? Why don't you look down, you dear, kind moon, on the wilderness of our world and see all the homes now emptied, the lights extinguished, the lives vanished? Why don't you feel, moon, the terrible sadness that has enveloped the world? Moon, dearest moon, look down with your bright eyes on this cursed world and see. Do you see, moon, the flames shooting out of the tall chimneys and up to the heavens? Already they are burning. The children of my people, who just hours ago were alive, and now in minutes no trace of them remains. Come here, moon, and remain here motionless forever. Sit down on a mourner's bench at my people's grave and shed at least a tear for them, for no one else is left here to weep, to mourn for them. May your only ray, your mournful light, burn forever at my people's grave. May that be their mourner's candle, that only you can light for them.
O zabranie głosu proszę ocalałego z Auschwitz, pana Bernarda Offena.
I would now like to invite a survivor, Mr. Bernard Offen, to take the floor.
Dear survivors, friends, compatriots, and those who are listening and watching, my name is Bernard Offen. I have come to this place of death to talk to you about life. Although I feel torn to pieces inside, I'm almost 97 years young, and I'm a survivor of 5 camps, including this one. Why do I mention those days when you survive the Holocaust, when each day was a struggle to stay alive? You realize that each day of life is precious. I was born in Krakow and had a pretty fine life before the war started. I lived with my father and mother, Jacob, and Gittel, and my sister Miriam, and my brother Sam and Nathan. I was the youngest. Life for Jews in pre-war Krakow wasn't perfect, but it was pretty good. My family wasn't rich, but we had enough to eat, and for a little kid growing up next door to a chocolate factory, life was often sweet. When the Germans invaded, life changed pretty fast. Our family didn't manage to stay together. I smuggled food into the Krakow ghetto. One day after returning, I learned from my father and my mother and sister had been taken from the ghetto. They disappeared. Later, I learned that they had been murdered in Belzec's death camp. After many months, I was separated from my father in Auschwitz. My father was sent to the left toward death, and I was sent to the right. I remember that moment, our eye contact, and the feeling that we were seeing each other for the last time. He was sent to his death, and I was given a chance to live. Then they tattooed a number on my forearm, and I was transferred to a transit camp. There, when I asked what happened to my father, my fellow prisoners replied that he was turned into smoke. It took me some time to understand what that meant. I saw how people died from hunger and torture. I heard sounds of suffering, gunshots, dogs. I could smell the stench of burning corpses and the stench coming from the latrines. I even denied it to myself what I heard, smelled, and felt. I was liberated from a death march from Dachau concentration camp along with other prisoners by the American Army. At that time, I thought I was alone. However, after some months of searching if any family members survived, I found my two brothers who had joined General Under's army in Italy and who didn't know that I survived. We lived for a few years in England before we located a distant relative in America who sponsored the three of us to come and start a new life in Detroit, Michigan. In varying degrees, we managed to put the Holocaust behind us, but I always felt that I had to confront unanswered questions that have never left me. My first visit back to Poland was in 1981. I visited Auschwitz and realized that part of my healing process would be telling my story, especially to young people. I have been coming back to Poland regularly and visited Auschwitz many times, always bearing testimony and reconnecting with people. I made movies and wrote books. I always was trying to focus on life and focus on love. I learned that the only way forward we have as a people is not through revenge, anger, and resentment for crimes as awful as the Holocaust. I had learned that the only way forward was through empathy, seeing the intrinsic value of every human being on the planet and helping everyone uncover their self-worth. People always ask me how I survive. Was I clever or strong or lucky? I survived because people helped me. I call them my angels. My fellow prisoners helped me, Poles helped me, and even on occasion Germans helped me. The Holocaust showed me how awful human beings can be, but also, more importantly, how caring, and courageous, and empathetic we can be, we must be. After 70 years in America, I decided a few years ago to move back to Poland. I didn't like the way things were going in America, and I felt I had more work to do in Poland, educating my fellow citizens. So now, once again, I live in beautiful Krakow. I have found my home again in Kazimierz, the Jewish quarter, and my second home in the Jewish Community Center. And somehow, in a world that sadly has not learned the lessons of the Holocaust, where anti-Semitism and other hatreds are on the rise, my Krakow hometown has become one of the easiest and safest places to be Jewish. Every June, I do something incredible. I get on a bicycle at the gates of Auschwitz-Birkenau and ride along with hundreds of others, Jews and non-Jews, from across the world. From the darkness and despair of Auschwitz-Birkenau to the life and hope of the reborn Jewish community in Krakow during the ride for the living. Today, as I look at contemporary times, I see many signs I know all too well. I see hatred resurgent. I see violence beginning to be justified once again. I see people who believe their anger is more valuable than another human life. I say this because I am an old man who has seen where indifference leads to. And I say this because I believe. I truly believe that we can choose differently. I ask you today, let memory not be a burden. Let it be a light that guides us in the darkness. We, the witnesses, will soon pass away, but I believe this light will remain with you.
Szanowni Państwo,
Ladies and gentlemen,
symboliczne światło
we have
pamięci.
lit the symbolic light of remembrance. I would now like to invite Mr. Yossi Matias, a representative of the donors of the Auschwitz-Birkenau Foundation, to deliver the address.
I'm standing here humbled before the survivors who represent millions who perished. Mr. President, Director Dr. Cywinski, member of the Diplomatic Corps, representatives of the Polish government, distinguished guests, I'm deeply honored to stand before you. As someone born and raised in Israel, the Holocaust was not a chapter in history book. I was surrounded by survivors sharing their stories, by the shadows of families that were lost, and by the resilience of those who rebuilt. My grandparents and my wife's grandparents, born in Romania, Hungary, Poland, lost most of their family members in the Holocaust, including their parents, most of their siblings, with their spouses and young children, and numerous extended family members. I remember the never-ending pain in their eyes and the pictures of their loved ones who perished. My family is not an exception. Many Israelis and Jews and non-Jews around the world share the same history. As I'm standing here, I seek to honor the memory of all the millions who perished. I clearly remember the first visit to Auschwitz 14 years ago. Standing on this ground transformed the stories, pictures, and documentaries into crushing reality, feeling the magnitude of silence that is impossible to convey, the realization that what happened here is beyond comprehension. Returning today, I feel that weight again, listening to the moving testimonies we just heard and the inspiring words of Mr. Bernard Offen. I am moved beyond words. It is a stark reminder that while the history is vast and the magnitude of the Holocaust is unmanageable, the loss was always individual. A face, a name, a life cut short, a whole family line becoming extinct. Lechol ish yesh shem. Just recently, I visited the Warsaw Ghetto. Walking there was a profoundly touching experience for me, getting a glimpse into the scale of the history, communities, and lives that were erased. And the visit at the monument to the ghetto heroes was a reminder of the admirable bravery under unmanageable conditions. We're approaching a critical threshold. We're moving from the era of living memory to the era of historical memory. As the voices of the witnesses inevitably fade, the silence threatens to return. Our work is not just about keeping the historical data, but also making information accessible to everyone, everywhere. This is key to preserving the memory of the Holocaust. Technology can be a powerful tool for promoting education and remembrance. Never again is not a passive hope. It is an active imperative. It demands our unwavering attention. That is why, over 15 years ago, I was proud to start and help lead an effort to digitize Holocaust documents and make them broadly available, partnering with museums around the world. From Yad Vashem in Jerusalem to right here at the Auschwitz-Birkenau Museum, to ensure history is preserved for future generations and never forgotten. What eventually became Google Arts and Culture where now hundreds of museums, archives, and collections of humanity's precious heritage from all over the world are made available online, in fact started with this urgent mission to ensure the documents, photographs, and artifacts of the Holocaust were preserved. And no longer bound to physical world. walls, to ensure that the information and the truth remain accessible to billions of people, regardless of where they live. I will never forget a message I received from an Auschwitz survivor living in Australia. He told me that for the first time in over 65 years, he was finally able to see the faces of the friends he has lost and the streets of his childhood town. It was a deeply personal restoration of a world taken away. Since then, I have heard so many other families who, through this work, had finally seen images of relatives they thought had vanished forever. But today, these memories are being challenged by growing shadow of distortion. The preservation of testimony has never been more critical. It is no longer enough to simply make information available. Our responsibility is to ensure it remains trusted and deeply understood. By leveraging technology, we can transform historical content into living memory, one that remains accessible and profoundly felt by the generations to come. So we're redoubling our efforts. We're working with the Auschwitz-Birkenau Museum to leverage the best of our technology, to help empower those who are doing the important work. We want to help preserve these testimonials, to allow the world to experience this place through digital lenses. Nothing can replace the experience of standing here in person. Nothing replaces the first-hand experience of the freezing air and the silence of this place. But we must reach the millions who cannot make the journey. We must ensure that a student in Buenos Aires or a researcher in Tokyo can bear witness with a sense of presence and immersion that was never before possible. We must make sure that everyone, everywhere, with a click of a button, can get a glimpse into the horror of this dark chapter in history. We must use every tool in our disposal, from data preservation to global education, to ensure that the message of this place remains clear, loud, and undeniable for every generation to come. And we should do that, and we should do what we can to help support the mission of Never Again. I want to especially thank the archivists and historians here and everywhere. You are the guardians of the evidence, and we are humbly here to provide tools that help you preserve it and share it with everyone around the globe. I want to express my sincere thanks to the Auschwitz-Birkenau Museum and Foundation for your tireless, holy work. Please know that we remain committed to supporting you in this shared mission. As I'm standing here, I seek to honor those who rebuilt, and I seek to honor the memory of all the millions who perished. Yeh zichram baruch.
Ladies and gentlemen, I now give the floor to the custodian of the Auschwitz-Birkenau Memorial, Dr. Piotr Cewiński.
Człowiek postawiony wobec zdarzeń niespodziewanych.
Man faced with the unexpected, unpredictable events
Opiera się w dużej mierze na swoim doświadczeniu.
relies primarily on his experience.
Szuka punktów odniesienia.
The experience provides him with points of reference
Człowiek
and
bez
help.
doświadczenia.
A man without experience is helpless.
Doświadczenie jest mocą.
Experience is power.
W czasach szybkich zmian,
In times of rapid changes, in times of instability,
w chwilach niebezpiecznych,
in insecure times, unpredictable, hard to fathom, we all are looking for points of reference, for help in remembrance.
pamięć pomaga.
Remembrance helps.
w unikaniu zagrożeń.
Remembrance helps you find your way around, to avoid threats, to adopt directions, and to act with awareness. It is remembrance that is our stronghold, that is our support, that is the source of assessment in the most difficult of situations. It is from remembrance that the hierarchy of our actions and behavior stems from. Remembrance is power, just like experience. Remembrance and experience are twin notions, similar, like a pair of twins. They are like treasures, like signposts, warnings. Today we live in difficult times. The order that we have built with so much effort is breaking up. The international law is violated. The whole systems of rules and values collapse in front of our eyes. We all see these days more clearly the weight of experience and remembrance. We experience more and more unpredictable and inexplicable situations. So we have to rely on experience and its twin sister, remembrance. Memory is not a burden. It points to meaning. It does not stem from duty. It multiplies opportunity. Remembrance should not be seen as a lesson to be learned, but as a source of real support, enforcement, increasing awareness, deepening one's cognition. Those who don't value experience won't be able to value remembrance. Your experience, dear survivors, so painful and difficult, so cruel and unimaginable, has become the foundation of our remembrance. Among modern day's challenges, you are our signpost, our power, our warning, individual and collective one. Every day should start from the feeling of gratitude for you, for the survivors. Because if we were to reject the remembrance and experience, we will, like Salman Gradowski, start to accuse even the moon of indifference, begging it to come to have a look at the dark earth and to see.
Szanowni Państwo,
Ladies and gentlemen, let those lit candles be the symbol of our remembrance of the victims of Auschwitz concentration and death camp. And now I'd like to invite President of the Republic of Poland, Karol Nawrocki, to place a candle.
znicz zostanie złożony przy
The candle will be placed at the monument to the victims of Auschwitz that is between the ruins of the gas chambers and crematoria 2 and 3. Now I'd like to invite the representatives of benefactors Yossi Matias and Rowan Barnett from the company supported this place, Google, and Wojciech Soczewica, who's the Director General of the Auschwitz-Birkenau Foundation.
Znicz zostanie złożony przy
The candle will be placed near the remnants of the so-called White House, one of the makeshift gas chambers close to the Auschwitz-Birkenau camp.
Zapraszam opiekunów miejsca pamięci.
Now I'd like to ask the custodians of this remembrance place, Ms. Marta Cienkowska, Minister for Culture, the Secretary of the International Auschwitz Council, Mr. Marek Zając, and the Director of the museum, Mr. Piotr Cywiński, to also place the candle.
Znicz zostanie złożony.
The candle will be placed at the ruins of the gas chamber and crematorium number 4 that has been set on fire by the prisoners during a rebellion, during which probably Zaumen Gradowski was killed.
Szanowni Państwo,
ladies and gentlemen, now I'd like to hold a common prayer by Rabbin Tomer Rechowi, the Bishop of the Bielsko and Żywiec Diocese, Bishop Roman Pindel. Bishop of the Cieszyn Diocese, Evangelic Augsburg, Patrian Korczago, the representative of the Polish Archcatholic Church, priest Ichumen Alexander.
מזמור לדוד, אדוני רואי לא אחסר, בינו דשא ירביצני, על מי מנוחות ינעלני, נפשי ישובב, ינחני במעגלי צדק למען שמו, גם כי ילך בגץ על מוות, לא ירא רע, כי אתה עמדי, שבטך ומשענתך המה ינחמוני. תערוך לפניי שולחן נגד צורריי. דשנת בשמן ראשי, כוסי רוויה. אך טוב וחסד רדפוני כל ימי חיי, ושבתי בבית אדוני לאורך ימים. אל מלא רחמים. אל מלא רחמים שוכן במרומים, דיין אלמנות ואבי יתומים. המצא מנוחה נכונה על כנפי השכינה, במעלות קדושים וטהורים, כזוהר הרקיע, מאירים ומזהירים, לנשמות 6 מיליונים אחינו ואחיותינו, רבבות אלפי ישראל, אנשים, נשים וטף, שנהרגו, שנשחטו, שנשרפו, שנחנקו, שנקברו חיים ושהומתו בכל מיני מיתות משונות ואכזריות בידי הגרמנים הנאצים ועוזריהם, ושהלכו לעולמם על קידוש השם, בעבור שאנו מתפללים לעילוי נשמותיהם. לכן בעל הרחמים יסתירם בסתר כנפיו לעולמים, ויצרור בצרור החיים את נשמותיהם. בגן עדן תהיה מנוחתם, אדוני הוא נחלתם, וינוחו בשלום על משכבותם, ונאמר אמן. קדיש. יתגדל ויתקדש שמי רבה, בעלמא דברה קירותה, וימליך מלכותה, ויצמח פוגנה, ויקרב משיחה. חייכון וימכון וחיי דכל בית ישראל, בעגלה ובזמן קריב, ואמרו אמן. יהא שמי רבה מברך לעלם לעלמי עלמיה, יתברך וישתבח ויתפאר ויתרומם ויתנשא ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתעלל, שמי דקודשה בריחו. לעילה מן כל ברכתה שירתה שבחתה ונחמתה, דאמירן בעלמה, ואמרו אמן. יש לומר רבה משמיה וחיים עלינו ועל כל ישראל, ואמרו אמן. עושה שלום במרומיו וברחמיו יעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל עמו ישראל, ואמרו אמן.
Wieczny odpoczynek racz im dać, Panie, a światłość wiekuista niechaj im świeci. Niech odpoczywają w pokoju wiecznym.
Wszechmogący Boże, ponownie przed Twoim obliczem wspominamy tych, którzy na szczególnym miejscu kaźni bestialsko byli mordowani.
Dear God, we commemorate those who were murdered here. We trust in you, our God, to absolve them from suffering so they can live forever. Help us learn from the past. Help us overcome any angst against others. Motivate us to live in peace, friendship and love. Amen.
Boże duchów i ciała wszelkiego, który śmierć zdeptałeś, szatana obezwładniłeś i darowałeś życie Twemu światu.
God,
Sam, Panie,
you who defeated the devil, lay the souls of the camp to rest in the place of lightness, in the place of happiness, in the place of peace, where all suffering and pain is gone. Forgive them, as good God, all the sins that they might have committed, as there is no human being who would not sin. You are without sin, and your justice is justice for ages, and your word is the truth. Amen.
Jak łania
pragnie wody ze strumieni, tak moja dusza pragnie Ciebie, Boże. Moja dusza tęskni za Bogiem, Bogiem żywym. Kiedy przyjdę i ujrzę oblicze Boga? Łzy stały się moim pożywieniem we dnie i w nocy. Gdy cały dzień mnie pytają, gdzie jest Twój Bóg? Moja dusza rozczula się, gdy wspominam, jak kroczyłem w tłumie, idąc do domu Bożego. Wśród głosów radości i dziękczynienia świątecznego orszaku. Dlaczego się smucisz, moja duszo? Czemu się we mnie trwożysz? Zaufaj Bogu, bo jeszcze będę Go sławił. On jest moim zbawieniem i Bogiem. Moja dusza dręczy się we mnie, więc wspominam Cię z ziemi Jordanu i Hermonu, z góry Misar. Otchłań wzywa otchłań hukiem Twoich wodospadów. Wszystkie fale i nawałnice przewaliły się nade mną. W dzień okazuje mi Pan swoją łaskę, a w nocy Mu śpiewam i modlę się do Boga mojego życia. Mówię do Boga, opoko moja, dlaczego mnie zapomniałeś? Czemu chodzę smutny? Czemu wróg mnie gnębi? Obelgi moich wrogów kruszą mi kości. Gdy cały dzień mnie pytają, gdzie jest Twój Bóg? Dlaczego się smucisz, moja duszo? Czemu się we mnie trwożysz? Zaufaj Bogu, bo jeszcze będę Go sławił. On jest moim zbawieniem i Bogiem.
Za nami główne uroczystości 81.
So,
rocznicy wyzwolenia.
the commemoration of the 81st anniversary of the liberation of the German Nazi concentration and extermination camp is already behind us. And now I'd like to talk with our guest, Mr. Michał Żebrowski, who participated in the commemoration. During the commemoration, you read the memories of someone who lived through hell. Do such words mean more than the words of Setkiewicz, for example, and whether saying them at such a site has some special weight? Well, I think we cannot compare these two things because literature and actor performance is something completely different than what a person described being in hell and the experience of hell. So this is a very daunting task because here we don't speak about any performance or art. We are a human being. I was a human being in the purest sense because this is a situation where people experience that there are no people at the other side, no human beings. And as a parent looking at the heap of children's shoes, this is something that cannot be put into words. You can sense the horror with every pore of your skin and with every breath. So this is really frightening for everyone, surely. In the program, we talked about remembering, about passing those memories, about how to also keep those memories. Can art, literature, film be a good medium for memory, for remembrance? Can an author be a good guardian of memory? Well, I think that every human being can be a good guardian of memory. We heard a lot about remembrance, about experience, and for young people, such an experience can be a visit at this site. I am exceptionally impressed by the quality of this museum. There are no such museums in the world with such equipment, with the dedication of the personnel who work diligently on everything that has been maintained here. So this is very constructive that we Poles can take care of that with such dedication. I have never seen such a museum in Paris or anywhere abroad. And it very much gives me hope that we do understand and that we want to preserve it and that we can shoulder this burden, that we can do it. Well, regarding the place we are in, Auschwitz and Birkenau, the sites that were witnessing this hell on earth, one of the sounds or silent symbols of this place is, is silence. Is this silence, from your viewpoint, a screaming silence or silence that wants peace and quiet? Well, I think this silence is a testimony to human helplessness towards what happened. And I think that the most, I don't know how to call it, but the most noble way of honoring that, or expressing your pain, is silence.
And
do you think that contemporarily we are able to understand what happened here? Because we have the testimonies, we know the history, we know this place, we know what kind of methods were used to strip people of their humanity, but can we somehow understand it with our minds, or is it just a story of the past? Well, I think that the biggest conclusion here is that with a simultaneous world, with a different world functioning, a human being was able to create this place. That this place was born in a head of an evil human being. And I think that we have to, we cannot let these monstrously evil ideas to lead us. We have to ardently protest against it and courageously. And everyone here says that we shouldn't be afraid because there is nothing to be afraid of. But we as Poles, knowing it happened in our country, I think that every Pole has this choice of shouldering and sharing remembrance. We asked many guests whether the world has drawn a lesson from Auschwitz of how dangerous this place was, considering how many conflicts there are in the world and how many conflicts are about to probably start. Have we done our homework, or do we have to still do it? Well, I think that there are people who aren't and are reasonable. I think that there are some people that aren't going to understand that. The world is not changing, sadly, but we have to do what we are here for. There is no other way. Is it going to be more difficult because we are entering an era which is a post-memory or post-remembrance era? The people who suffered here are dying. Well, my father was 11 years old when the war broke out, and my adult life was full of such stories. Some time ago, I described all that, and I passed it to my sons, and I felt great relief because my father told me that there was not a day that he didn't think about what happened during the war. And when I noted down all those thoughts of my father, I understood that it's not going to vanish, that at least my children are going to know the story. Well, but considering how different extreme movements gain popularity all around the world, is there a fear of what Marian Turski said, that Auschwitz did not come from above? Is this becoming a self-fulfilling prophecy? Sadly, yes. And do you think that we can do anything against it? Well, many people say that we should do what we can do best. And I often say that I don't know what we should do for human beings not to be evil towards each other. Now, drawing on your professional experience, you represent the arts, and movies specialize in emotions. Do you think that art can influence people in such a way that it can somehow fend off evil? I will say something brutal. The art does not change the world, it can describe the world, and good art is something that brings people together, which makes them be together and not be divided. So in this dimension, yes, there was Charlie Chaplin who made the Dictator movie during the war.
Michał Żebrowski był razem z nami, pani Michale.
Michał Żebrowski was with us. Thank you very much. And now let's look at the 81st commemoration of Auschwitz liberation. After many months, I've been separated from my father in Auschwitz. My father was directed to the left towards death, and I was directed to the right. I remember this moment. We looked at each other, and there was this feeling that we saw ourselves for the last time. He was sent to death, and I got a chance to live. Later on, I was tattooed a number on my forearm, and I was moved to a transit camp. There, when I asked what happened to my father, the other prisoners said that he turned into smoke. It took me some time to understand what it meant. I saw people dying of hunger and dying of torture. I heard screams, suffering, shootings, and I felt, I sensed the burnt flesh and the odor coming from the latrines, and I still didn't take in all that I experienced. We have to take care of that, and we need them to see that they cannot deny the Holocaust. We have to use all the tools from data protection so that the meaning of this place is clear for all the future generations. We have to do all that and much more, everything we can in order to support this mission. Remembrance is not a burden. It points to the sense. It's not an obligation. It multiplies opportunities. It shouldn't be seen as a homework to be done, but rather as a source of some real support, broadening your understanding. Only those who don't value experience won't value remembrance. Your experience, ladies and gentlemen, that was so painful and difficult, so cruel and difficult to imagine, has become a foundation of our remembrance.
Without political speeches, but with a moving address by Bernard Offen. These were today's commemorations of the 81st anniversary of the liberations of the Auschwitz camp. With us, we have Michał Broniatowski, TVP World Editor-in-Chief, Konstanty Gebert, journalist and columnist for Kultura Liberalna, and Jacek Stawiski, Editor-in-Chief of Tygodnik Powszechny. Good afternoon, gentlemen. If we were to take one lesson from today's commemorations, what would it be? It's hard to say. I think everyone should answer for themselves. I'm part of the generation that had their knowledge, though incomplete, and though incomprehensible. I found out about the camp in primary school. I remember the lies that were told in the inscriptions that there were citizens of Belgium, Czechoslovakia, Yugoslavia, were the citizens who died there. And at the end was the letter Z, Żydzi, Polish for Jews. I don't have a piece of advice for what should we learn from this, but we definitely should never forget that, should never abandon this place. We should never neglect any sites related to the Holocaust. We should never let any evil people play with the legacy. As a teenager, as a kid, I witnessed how falsehoods were spread, how certain things were not talked about. Luckily, that has been changing since the 70s, since the 1980s. Nowadays, despite so many important words being said, there are people who play with the past, and that's a new danger. The witnesses are still with us. They continue to speak. What can happen when they're gone? When memory becomes history, this always happens. Mr. Ceviński said that remembrance is the twin sister of experience. That's what Director Ceviński said. When we meet with remembrance and experience, we meet with texts that are ones among many. And it was a great test for us whether we would be able to make the memory of the witnesses of the Holocaust exist even when they're gone. And we already know we failed. The content about the Holocaust competes with other kinds of content. There's all sorts of abuse being carried out towards it. The Holocaust is put together with any other kinds of genocide. In all that, we lose the truth about the Holocaust. There has been a rise in anti-Semitism again. It used to be taboo in Europe for several decades. American journalist David Reeve, in his book about Bosnia, wrote that after Sarajevo, after Srebrenica, we know what never again means. Never again will Germans kill Jews during the Second World War, and that's all it means. So we fundamentally have failed. And I don't believe that the memory of the Holocaust will last in any other form than a ritualized set of words and gestures. It's good that today's commemorations did not include any politicians, because they would perhaps try to take over. It's not true that we learn on our mistakes. We will have to face the consequences of the fact that we did not draw any lessons from the Holocaust. So where did we go wrong? If the witnesses are still here, we are sitting here among the ruins of the gas chambers. Why the messages? Why do these messages appear in the media and come out of the politicians' mouths? Agnieszka Holland once said that the vaccine against anti-Semitism expired. That's one of the elements. Many years have passed. What you could hear here today is less and less heard across the distance. The scream, never again.
Zagłady, od czasu zbrodni II wojny światowej już wielokrotnie skompromitowano.
Has been compromised many times since the Second World War.
Nie jest słyszane, zwłaszcza wtedy.
It's not being heard these days either.
Jest po prostu pustym dźwiękiem.
It's an empty sound. Crimes are being committed, and no one gives second thought about what happened here at Auschwitz-Birkenau. Unfortunately, the memory of this place is becoming gradually confined to books and papers. Should we change the language we use to describe what happened here? The museum itself has updated the way it talks about the Holocaust to adapt the narrative to young people. Should the language change? It's not about the language, it's about what we say. The fundamental mistake is that this is a museum. Museums are safe places. We go there to see the past behind a glass in a cabinet, as if it could not happen again. Auschwitz, once set up, does not cease to exist because its enemies had better weapons. Auschwitz, it's still a place that can happen, and we should be horrified upon leaving the museum, and we don't come out horrified out of a museum. It's not about the language, it's about whether we are able to say that this was us humans. We could do it, we can do it, be afraid of one another. And this we don't hear. The question of the language is secondary.
Panie redaktorze, czy tutaj faktycznie tego przerażenia jest za mało po wyjściu z tych...
Should people be more horrified indeed when leaving these grounds? Different people have different views. I have been and I am still horrified with this place. Not far from where I live, near Krakow, is the site of execution of 50 Jews, and one of the national parks is an equally horrific place to this one. I usually visit that site around the 27th of January. And about the museum, what Mr. Gebert said is not to criticize what is being done here. Wonderful people work here. They do amazing work. So what needs to be changed? Stop protecting us. The museum tells the story of what some people, namely Germans, did to other people, namely Jews, at some point in the past. That's what David Reeve was talking about. The Holocaust happened in the past by someone, to someone, and that's it. And the message this place should convey should be, yes, we did it, which means we can do it again. Therefore, we should be afraid. To remind the words of Yehuda Bauer, who recently passed away, a researcher of the Holocaust, who in one of the chapters of one of his books about Holocaust said that this is all by human doing. There were no animals, no superhuman beings involved. This is all a man's work. Once I talked privately to Marek Zając from the International Auschwitz Council, and a dozen or so years ago, we established that Auschwitz can happen again. This is what we're talking about here. This is why we should be horrified. Perhaps then it will act as a break. The breaks have been weakened, if not eliminated. Some means of expressions, perhaps a new language is needed. Digitalization, more imaging, which doesn't change the fact that historians and researchers should take over the knowledge that they have to acquire new knowledge. And once they gain it, then they should think how to pack it and how to convey it. It's a monumental amount of work. Marian Turski said that Auschwitz didn't come out of nowhere. Marian Turski unfortunately passed away. Gentlemen, thank you for being with us today. And let's go back once again to today's commemorations. The words of Zalman Gerdowski were quoted, who ended up in Auschwitz together with all of his family. He knew that no one will survive, but he decided to be the witness to the survivor.
Dzisiaj, gdy samotny I opuszczony, jestem jedyny, który tu pozostał.
Today, when I'm alone here, when my home, my family, my world, my nation were exterminated by those pirates, and I'm one of those sentenced to death. I'm alone in my prison, enchained. Today, when I see her, I run from her as from a ghost. Why do you come today as deep in love and dreams, as enchanted as before? And you do not even feel the great disaster, the great misfortune that they, the murderers and pirates, have brought with them to the world. Why do you feel nothing? Don't you miss them, the millions of vibrant lives that once in all of Europe lived calm and carefree until the storm arrived and drowned the world in a sea of blood? Why don't you look down, you dear, kind moon, on the wilderness of our world and see all the homes now emptied, the lights extinguished, the lives vanished? Why don't you feel, moon, the terrible sadness that has enveloped the world? Moon, dearest moon, look down with your bright eyes on this cursed world and see. Do you see, moon, the flames shooting out of the tall chimneys and up to the heavens? Already they are burning the children of my people who just hours ago were alive, and now in minutes no trace of them remains. Come here, moon, and remain here motionless forever. Sit down on a mourner's bench at my people's grave and shed at least a tear for them, for no one else is left here to weep, to mourn for them. May your only ray, your mournful light, burn forever at my people's grave. May that be their mourner's candle that only you can light for them.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Good evening, Rowan Barnett. It is my pleasure to talk to you today about this anniversary and the collaboration with Google.org. You're the director of Google.org and the philanthropic arm of the company. We have met 12 months ago here at Birkenau at the 80th anniversary. We are meeting here again. One of the most important reasons is that your company has been continuing to support the work of the Auschwitz-Birkenau Memorial in various ways. And I think this is a very good moment to ask you how this collaboration has been developing for the past 12 months and the directions of your involvement and your support in the future.
Well, first of all, thank you so much, Wojtek. I mean, it's been incredibly moving to be here and listening to the survivors that somehow still find the strength to come here and share their story with the world. And Bernard Offen, reminded us of the responsibility that will soon forever pass to us, and hence the urgency there is for remembrance work. And I think we've made significant progress over the last 12 months supporting the museum to help make Auschwitz accessible to everyone, everywhere. Firstly, our Google Arts and Culture team have been helping the museum to digitize the artworks that they have in their archive. And so using our specialized technology, the museum have been able to take really high definition photos of artworks, of pictures, sometimes just drawn on small scraps of paper. And when these get put online, then I think we will find some really new insights and new perspectives on the experiences and the horrors of the camp. The other project, Auschwitz in Front of Your Eyes, the live guided tour, something we've supported the museum on. But I think you've been doing a lot of work there, so it would be wonderful to hear an update from you.
That is true. We have been collaborating very closely with Google and the Auschwitz-Birkenau Memorial as the Auschwitz-Birkenau Foundation. There is a very close partnership, and it is getting closer and closer, which for me personally has also this additional value that friendships are growing out of this professional collaboration. And you are of course right that over the past year we were able to translate the Auschwitz in Front of Your Eyes platform into new languages, so new audiences can be reached with the program, and students, politicians, companies worldwide who have an interest in learning more about the history of this site and individual stories of prisoners, victims and survivors alike have now the chance to do so through the platform. We have developed new languages. We have been training guides who need additional training to guide viewers distantly, remotely through new technology, which is so critical and for which I would like to thank you once again. What is also an important factor in our collaboration is obviously new technologies and the application of new technologies which are changing so quickly. Time is passing very, very swiftly here. And I wanted to ask you, we don't have much time, but there are some ideas for the future, for our collaboration. Could you develop a little bit about what these possible areas of collaboration could be in the future too?
Absolutely. Well, I think the first thing that's very clear is that nothing replaces being here in Auschwitz physically. But where technology can help is really bridge that gap between people that can't be here. And therefore, projects like Auschwitz in Front of Your Eyes are a great example of technology making memory accessible. I think where I'm very excited about the power of AI is its ability to connect and bring to life the stories, some of the fates of the Holocaust, by connecting fragments of information that are strewn across so many archives across the world. Now, I'm talking of a personal story. I actually found out about my great-great-aunt, Beate Weidenfeld, and found out about the fate that she suffered right here in Auschwitz. It was in the book of names that for the first time I found her name. Since then, I put her name and her date of birth into Google's AI tool, Gemini, and suddenly I found it was able to look across multiple archives that had been digitized, and I found her last place of residence. I found the transport that she was taken to Auschwitz on, and also a record that indicated that she was most likely sent straight to the gas chambers here. And so if you think about the opportunity that we have, if we can digitize archives and bring photos and letters and testimonies and records and bring them all together and use AI to connect them, then we can create millions of stories of individuals and essentially give back families their history and also preserve the truth for future generations. And so, yeah, I mean, I'd love to know how the museum and the foundation are thinking about.
Well, I think this is probably the central part of the obligation, responsibility this site or any other site in the world that carries this burden, this responsibility has to play. It is exactly about that, to try to bring back the memory of those who are meant to be forgotten, with wonderful scholars, with wonderful people dealing with preservation, with researchers, with companies like yours, and combining forces. I think that the potential to I don't want to say to bring back to life, but to bring back the memory of those whose pictures we see, for example, on that wall, is so critical and so important. 81 years after Auschwitz-Birkenau has been liberated. I think that every time when we come here, personal histories and family histories come to life. And I would like to thank you for being here again with us. I would like to say that new technology has a critical role, and there are also risks. There are big challenges, but there are also risks. And I would like to introduce a material which our viewers will see in a second. It is about exactly that. The threats, falsifying reality poses a big threat. We think that the biggest risk is for truth nowadays. And this can be seen on many cases, many examples with social media. With this, I would like to thank you, and the material is being shown now. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Twoja muzyka jest ostatnią rzeczą.
Your music is the last thing I am going to hear. The girl walking to the gas chamber in Auschwitz allegedly whispered these words to Heniek, the camp violinist. Isn't that a touching image? Exactly, except that it is not true. This is currently the most popular fake story about the Auschwitz-Birkenau camp. The development of artificial intelligence and its rapid pace mean that it also affects the sphere of memory, an area the museum deals with. Unfortunately, this development is often negative in this respect, and we can see it very clearly.
Fałszywe informacje
False information about history appears mainly on popular social media platforms. Most often they concern World War II and the Holocaust. There are social media sites that operate in such a way that every post from Auschwitz-Birkenau Memorial website is copied word for word and accompanied by an AI-generated photo, which is then presented as true history. That is one element. The second element is the generation of completely fabricated photographs and the addition of stories that are in no way documented, that are entirely made up, and that are unknown to researchers because they never happened. Perhaps the most extreme example of this is the pseudo-creation of a fake life report from a concentration camp. This type of manipulation carries an additional risk. Artificial intelligence also overlaps with the topic of disinformation. It is currently present mainly in social media, but not only there. These are elements that are actually troubling for us here at the memorial site, because very often, especially on social media platforms, but not only there, artificial intelligence is used to generate a large number of posts, both with text and images, as well as videos, which are often indistinguishable to the audience. Whether they are real, historically true and factual, or whether they are simply contemporary digital creations. How can we tell real photos from those created by artificial intelligence? A good example is a comparison of a real photo with a fake one. The photo on the right is original and was taken in Amsterdam in the 1930s. The image on the left was generated on a computer. How are they different? The original photo has many imperfections resulting from the photo technology of the time. Pay attention to the distinctive grain and compare it with the photo on the left side of the frame. There is no such graining there. Original photos from World War II are usually of poor technical quality. Artificial intelligence idealizes that reality which you can see when comparing the two photographs. However, above all, you have to remember the time and place in which these photographs were taken. It is obvious that there was a total ban on taking any. Even SS officers were not allowed to take photographs unless it was justified in some way, unless they had the appropriate permission. Therefore, photographs allegedly taken by an SS officer in the camp for private use are very unlikely. The only such case we know of is the photographs taken on the camp ramp. AI, artificial intelligence, deep fakes can be powerful tools that can falsify also history. And this is the subject of the talk with our guest, Paweł Sawicki, who's the Deputy Press Officer of the Auschwitz Museum. Now, referencing what I have said, I wanted to ask you whether the museum uses AI already. Well, technology is a tool, and we have heard about technology helping with digitization, with making displays available all around the world. And I think that there are different uses of such technology. We can use it, for example, for translation. We have AI and different translation systems which allow us to communicate better. It helps us to moderate content because we get comments in various languages. In the past, it was much more difficult. Now we can analyze large data sets and check what is written. We also have a number of documents that can be analyzed with technology. So we can use all those tools in a very positive way. But here we also have examples of AI that we of course want to learn and understand what happens with such tools when generating images and text. We can see that such tools in the wrong hands can be very dangerous and painful for such a place like this memorial. What forms of AI do you encounter most often, and how do you fight them? What kind of tools do you have? We don't have many tools as of yet. We, of course, need allies, and there are various allies. these are our followers on social media platforms who try to report such things. But of course, there is this phenomenon of copying our content and replacing the photos with other photos. We can see that there are some distortions of the photos. We can see some photos which don't reflect the reality but have the same text. And we also see video generation of the things that supposedly happened at Auschwitz. So there are, of course, allies who work hand in hand with us. We reach a lot of people with our social media platforms, but I think that there is this responsibility on the one hand where, of course, you can disseminate such creations of AI. And of course, these platforms should be responsible for that. But I think that it's also important that the tool that allows us to somehow hamper the preparation of such texts and generated content, these are the large language models. And of course, there should be some safeguards there, not only for image generation, but also for video generation. It's enough to spend some 10 seconds in an online browser to see that neither prisoners nor officers could take photographs in the camp. And then we see a large number of such photos online and we think they are real. How does this happen? Well, I think that there are many layers to that. There is this contract between those who generate and those who receive that. We think that somebody was at a given place and took a photograph, but I think that this is the new reality, that we get to know that images can also be generated. It's also about the communication via social media, where this discourse changes, that it happens very quickly, and there is no time to think about what we see. Those who disseminate those images online, of course, rely on emotions. And due to the fact that it's very superficial, we have to teach ourselves how to function in this new digital reality when such images from Auschwitz can be artificially generated. And it's good that we talk about it, because in order for awareness to be there, we have to understand how this problem looks like. How should we react in such situations? Because a comment that something is not true, that it's an AI-generated content, makes an algorithm to work further on. How should we act so that we do not advertise for such content and we make it disappear from the internet? It's a huge problem, because even our account would be commenting that we are a big account, and of course we increase the visibility of such posts. What we can do is to address the platforms themselves, that such content is against the guidelines if it's not marked with AI generation symbol. Of course, different platforms have different guidelines, but we should deem that generation of a false victim of a concentration camp or false events, that it shouldn't happen. Of course, all those models are learning, and of course they can be adapted so that when somebody tips a prompt of creating an image, might get an answer that it's not ethical, it's not right, that it somehow is against some values. So there are a few layers to that. Thank you very much. This was Paweł Sawicki, the deputy press speaker for the Auschwitz Museum. And now let's sum up what happened in the main sauna of the Auschwitz camp. This was the 81st anniversary of the Auschwitz-Birkenau liberation.
The commemorations of the 81st anniversary of the liberation of the German Nazi concentration and extermination camp Auschwitz-Birkenau are drawing to a close. We had the opportunity to listen to memories, accounts, inspiring talks on both the past and the future. If we were to draw conclusions as a society from history, it's worth thinking about what one of the survivors, along with other four survivors, talked about. I'm talking here about Bernard Offen, who said that if every day becomes a fight for survival, then every moment becomes very valuable. Asked how he managed to cope, to survive his stay in this hell on earth, so to speak, whether he was lucky, whether he was shrewd, he replied that people helped him, and thanks to their goodness, he managed to come out of it unscathed. He called them living angels. So Auschwitz showed him both the worst and the best side of humanity. I think these worlds are worth remembering. Our live broadcast is not ending yet. I encourage you to see a conversation that will sum up today's commemorations. Talk between Mike Zions, the Secretary of the International Auschwitz Council, the custodian, and the custodian of this site, Mr. Dr. Piotr Cewiński, head of the Auschwitz Memorial and Museum. Over to the studio. Bernard Offen, a survivor who spoke today during the commemorations, said, I ask you all to bear remembrance as not as a burden, but as a light that guides you through the shadows. And Piotr, you based your speech based on two pillars, a combination of remembrance and experience. Why are they so important? Well, first of all, I think we still can't talk about remembrance. It's a pillar, a support instrument for us. We teach history and we don't teach people how to remember and how to live with the memories. Even the language that we use when talking about memories is a language that is very heavy, uneasy to listen to. Memory, remembrance, duty of remembrance. Why don't we teach people something more helpful? That something that can give them wings in unpredictable situations when you don't know how to behave, and the world is becoming a place like this. Paradoxically, since Auschwitz was liberated, more and more time has passed, but I have no doubt that many people realize that it is here that they can find solace when the international order is breaking up, when the war is going on over the border, when the rules that seemed sacred become to come apart over in front of our eyes, and people seek solace in this hell on earth, or they talk about, like survivors, about life that will lead them through darkness. In the times we live in, people need a point of support that will help them find their way around the challenges. It's hard to imagine a more unanimously significant place, a more universal place. although I don't like this term. But if we're anxious about today's world and about the future, we need points of reference like this one. And I'm completely convinced that after Russia's aggression against Ukraine, after what we've seen in the EU-US relations, after what we've seen in the Middle East, after the escalation of tensions between China and Taiwan, the world has begun to burn, and memory stopped being a construct, an artificial construct or notion for people. It has become increasingly easier to think about remembrance as the source of some sort of wisdom or warning for humankind about themselves. So, warning is an obvious thing, but then we recalled Marian Turski's address, who passed away a year ago. And Marian Turski, when talking about the turbulent world, said, "Dear friends, do not be afraid at all. Seek strength, seek hope, because evil only wins when people feel helpless in the face of evil. If you're not afraid of evil, you can overcome it. Helpless or indifferent, to recall another word that Marian Turski would often use. I think it's the experience of many survivors to not be afraid, even in the darkest of nights. Their survival made them more sensitive to what is happening around them and what they should do, how they should react. They could not succumb to fear at the camp. They would not have survived. Marian Turski's words come from deep inside of his experience. Only a survivor could have said that. We have also listened to the testimony of Zaumen Gradowski, a member of Sonderkommando, a man who knew he would die, a man who lost his whole family at the camp, including his parents and his wife. He was forced to work at the Sonderkommando, but he keeps making notes. He hides them in the ground, believing that somebody will find them as his testimony. And a great learning comes from it to us, that at the bottom of hell you can still do something, and you should do something. Gradowski was a very good writer. I don't know where he drew the strength from to write his remarks after his work in the crematoria. Not only is his style poetic, but his writing has carry a lot of moral strength. These are deeply moral writings. He would address the moon, and I have no doubt that as a religious Orthodox Jew, I don't want to say any blasphemous word, but instead of the moon, perhaps he was talking about God. Thank you very much for being here with us. Also, thanks to our audience, thank you for being with us during those commemorations of the 81st anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz.